long suffering from pandemic blues, thousands of people, especially in North India, have taken off for the hills. The tourist hotspots are currently brimming with crowds. From hundreds frolicking at a waterfall in Mussoorie to hordes of travellers hitting the mall road in Shimla and Manali, the rise of revenge travel seriously threatens to derail India's fight against the coronavirus.
कोरोना तो जब पंजाब में थे तभी नहीं हमने माना कोरोना कोई चीज है। जब कोरोना था तब भी जिंदगी जी रहे थे और आज भी जी रहे हैं।
कह रहे हैं कि तीसरी लहर भी आएगी, उससे डर लग रहा है?
कुछ डर नहीं है, डर लग रहा तो घर में बैठे होते।
हम तो आपसे सुन रहे हैं कि तीसरी लहर आएगी।
आएगी नहीं?
नहीं आएगी, हमें तो नहीं लगता कि आएगी।
Playing in the snow, riding horses and yaks, standing under a waterfall. This is how Covidiots are putting India's COVID fight at risk. Curbs have been relaxed, and that means people have thronged hill stations in Himachal Pradesh. This is how people are holidaying at the Rohtang Pass. No questions of wearing masks or maintaining social distancing.
The local administration, they are saying they are constantly asking the tourists to wear the masks, but still people are defying the COVID-19 norms besides the social distancing.
After these images of tourists frolicking at the Kempty Falls in Mussoorie went viral, the Uttarakhand government has cracked the whip. The Tehri Garhwal administration has now said that only 50 people will be allowed here at a time, and that tourists will not be allowed to stay beyond 30 minutes. Tourists are thronging the hill stations in the north. They have said no to distancing and no to masks. All they seem to want is some reprieve from the heat and the pandemic blues.
भीड़ से दूर रहने का समय निकल गया, अब आप घूमने फिरने आओ, नज़ारे लो जिंदगी के।
कोरोना का डर तो है, लेकिन घर में हम बहुत बोर हो चुके हैं बैठ के, इसलिए तो थोड़ी आउटिंग करने का मन हुआ, इसलिए निकले हैं।
दिल्ली हुई या आसपास कहीं पे भी लोग ना फ्रस्ट्रेट हो चुके हैं, उनको निकलना है बाहर। और हम खुद इतने फ्रस्ट्रेट हो गए थे दिल्ली में रह कि कोरोना की वजह से, लॉकडाउन की वजह से, तो एक ब्रेक चाहिए था।
Hotels are fully booked. Tourists are forced to sleep in their cars at parking lots. Raising alarm bells over the frightening situation in the hills, the Union Health Ministry has taken up the matter with Himachal Pradesh government. The rush, however, has brought some cheer to the tourism industry. But even hotel owners acknowledge the risk of flouting norms.
See, we as hoteliers, we are always requesting people to wear masks. In fact, we don't allow anyone without mask to enter our hotels. And tourists who are not carrying masks, we give them masks when they go out of the hotel. And we always request them whenever they go out, when they are on the mall or anywhere else, to wear the mask at all times. Despite that, we see, yes, some tourists we see, they are not wearing masks. And I think they should be dealt with strictly.
As daily cases dip, the urge to beat the pandemic fatigue is real. But with a bulk of India's population largely unvaccinated, the risk runs high. And to all the Covidiots, the pandemic is far from over. Bureau Report, India Today.
You know, it's very clear that these Covidiots are inviting a third wave. But there are very serious questions that need to be raised. If, because of what you're seeing in those pictures, a third wave is expedited, what form could this third wave take? We're just about getting over the second wave. We're in July. When could this third wave be on our head? August, September, October, November, December, or later? Is there a way of trying to establish that? And also, if there is a wave, what will be its intensity or ferocity? Is there a way of knowing what ultimate shape this third wave will take? Those are complex questions, but we'll try and see if we can establish some answers. Joining me on this broadcast is Dr. Naresh Trehan, Chairman, Managing Director, Medanta, the Medicity. We have Gautam Menon. He's a researcher in modeling of infectious diseases, Professor of Physics at Ashoka University. Samiran Panda is a scientist and the head of the Division of Epidemiology and Communicable Diseases at the Indian Council of Medical Research. I want to go across first for a general overview to Dr. Trehan to try and explain to people watching at this time how dangerous the behavior that we're seeing is. I understand people have been locked in, they are frustrated, everybody can't have a private villa, and therefore very naturally people need to get to places which are more commercial and therefore more busy. How scared are you by the screens, by the images that you're seeing on the India Today screen, Dr. Rahul?
Of course, the images are very disturbing, Rahul. The basic thing is that we've always said, when the question is asked, when will the third wave come and how bad is it going to be? So it's very simple, 3 points that actually will determine what and when the wave will do. And at the timing, normally between the first and second wave was 32 weeks. Now, do we have 32 weeks? It depends on so many factors, but most importantly, 3 factors being: one, public behavior, which you're seeing now is very disturbing because actually the second wave is not over. It's just that relatively it's come down from 4 lakhs to 43,000. So it's still very much around. The second part is that vaccine is the only defense that we know today that can help us to mitigate the third wave. So the race to vaccinate has to be accelerated. There is some data from the government that says that the availability of vaccines will be exponentially ramped up, as by the end of this month and August, September, October onwards, we'll have plenty of vaccine to vaccinate. And the third is the government regulation. Now, local governments, it was left to the state governments to actually decide what they will allow and what they will not allow. So there is always this pressure of the economic conditions of the people in the state, that especially like you see the holidays that are happening today. Now, could it have been measured from the beginning? Yes, it could have been, knowing very well that if you let in thousands and thousands of people, that these kind of scenarios will develop. Now, what the fallout of all this will be, because you must be aware that the new variants are obviously more dangerous. If you look at the chart, the new waves in the US, and they say unvaccinated states, that is about 50%, or low vaccinated states, are seeing a surge.
Okay, so hold that thought. I want to go across to Gautam Menon to try and see if he can help establish what may happen next. You know, given all the modeling that you do, if people continue to behave this way, where do you see the COVID graph go? We're already seeing in a state like Kerala some shoots of another uptick in COVID numbers. The reproduction number is about 1 now. How alarmed are you by what you're seeing? If things continue this way, where could we be in a few weeks from now, Gautam?
I agree with Dr. Prehan that it's social factors that will really determine what's going to happen in the next few weeks. I expect that this will lead to some level of uptick in cases, especially in the north, where your visuals showed that. But I suspect that overall, this will not lead to a third wave, certainly as substantial as we saw in the second wave, which swept across India from about the middle of February till barely about a month ago. I would be concerned about states like Kerala, which really never, if you look at it, it's Kerala, Manipur, Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, Sikkim, which are still showing test positivities in excess of 10%. And over there, it's as though the second wave never really completed. And these are the states that I think...
Why is that? Some of these states seem to be stubborn, a Kerala or a Maharashtra, where the second wave never crashed in the way that it did in some other places. Is there a way of knowing why that's the case in your view?
I suspect that Maharashtra is probably now coming down. The numbers are going down. It's Kerala that I would be a little more worried about. And in my opinion, it's likely that Kerala managed this pandemic a little better than the other states. So overall, there were fewer people infected and therefore more people potentially susceptible. And I think it's this combination of a relaxation of norms that exist, plus the fact that there are more people, a significant fraction of the population is potentially susceptible, that you're seeing this reason why Kerala numbers aren't really coming down. I suspect that the Northeast as well may have some sort of similar behavior, as well as the fact that they lag, in a sense, central India, the bulk of India, by a little bit, maybe by about a month and a half in terms of their cases. So I would watch out for the Northeast, I would watch out for Kerala to see what might happen. But I'm reasonably sure, to whatever extent, that across much of India, much of central India, north, south, west, we will not see a wave of the size that we saw in the second wave.
No,
mainly
sure.
because many
So
people have already
the second wave was a tsunami. It doesn't need to get that bad. But how bad can it potentially get? Because what's happened between the start of the second wave and now is that A, more people are infected, so they have some antibodies, more people have jabs, so they have some kind of protection, but it still could get bad. Is that something that you're concerned about, Gautam?
I would be most concerned about new variants, because I think with the existing variants, given that so many people have been infected already, and the fact that many people have already been vaccinated, let's say 38% of our population have at least one jab, I would be I really don't think that the third wave will build up to that level or build up that fast. I would worry about people who have not been vaccinated yet. I would worry about the elderly who have not received their shots so far. I would worry about the immunocompromised who have not received 2 doses of the vaccines. These are the people who are potentially vulnerable, and these are people who could potentially contact the disease if we aren't careful. And that's still a large factor.
Dr. Maninder Agarwal, can you explain your sense of where we are going in the Sutra modeling that you're doing? If things stay the way they are the COVID numbers, according to you, likely to stay low as they've been over the past few weeks? Or are you concerned that the uptick that we're seeing in Kerala could spill over to other states? Because the original COVID wave also started in Kerala. Even in the second wave, there was first Maharashtra, Kerala, where numbers were high. So what could happen? Professor Maninder Agarwal.
Well, there is a clear difference between what happened in Maharashtra in second wave and what's happening there. In the second wave, their contact rate due to Delta variant had jumped very significantly before the second wave formally arrived. Whereas this time, there is no increase in the contact rate. All that is happening is a slow increase in the spread of the pandemic over the entire region. And that's to the Kerala as well. So I don't expect either of these two states to continue large numbers for extended period. They should start coming down. We actually did make a projection about the third wave, and we created 3 alternative scenarios depending on certain assumptions that we made. So broadly, what our projections say is that if there is no new, more infectious variant than the Delta one, then third wave, whenever it comes, will probably be just a ripple, about half the size as the first wave. On the other hand, if a more infectious variant, and we assume that a 25% more infectious variant than Delta, if it arrives in August, then the third wave would be somewhat more significant. It will be somewhat higher than the first wave.
So it could be worse than the first wave, but not as bad as the second wave. We'll build on that. Samir and Panda, can you give us a sense of what variants are being picked up? Both Gautam Menon and Maninder Agarwal refer to the threat of new variants. It's not the existing variant, but if new variants could be picked up, that things could get problematic. Are we seeing any new variants in India? What's happening internationally? Is there any variant of concern in India which you're looking out for at ICMR?
Well, we need to consider about 2 things. So first of all, if we talk about the variants, that's the biology of the virus and the behavior of the virus. And the new variants, even if they come out, one has to really see how are they behaving in terms of transmissibility. Is it really very high, although their reproduction rate is not any different from the second wave or the variant which was causing the second wave. That's one. Secondly, if the newly emerging variant, is it also capable of escaping the immunity that we have developed? That's the second question. So if the immunity developed by the natural or the following natural infection or following vaccination, if the new variant is able to escape that, that is going to be a matter of concern. And if these 2 characteristics get combined in a particular variant, that's worrisome in terms of a third wave coming or appearing very quickly. But even if these two things happen, like a new variant which is able to escape the immune ability that we have developed following infection or following vaccination, and also it's capable of more readily getting transmitted, then even we do not expect the third wave to be as high as we saw during the second wave. So that's
so
the
hold
first
that thought. The
concern
videos
about the
that our
vital
viewers saw
behavior. And the other is about human behaviors.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the videos that everyone saw in our first report were very disturbing, and the warning against overcrowding has come straight from the Prime Minister himself. Prime Minister Modi said that the images of tourists thronging hill stations must instill fear. The Health Ministry said today that the virus is very much here and that carelessness could prove costly.
Maskless tourists at Kempty Falls in Mussoorie, throwing all caution and social distancing norms to the wind. Tourists flocking to the hills without any precautions. As pandemic revenge travel continues unabated, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has issued an alert. With fears of a possible third wave looming, Prime Minister Modi's big warning came at the first cabinet meet after the reshuffle. In the meeting, the Prime Minister expressed concerns over the brazen COVID violations. The Prime Minister said that images of crowded places and people moving without masks is not a pleasant sight and that it should instill a sense of fear. The Prime Minister added that there should be no place for carelessness and complacency and that a single mistake would have far-reaching consequences. The Health Ministry too has once again reminded people that the virus is still very much there.
क्या है ओपन इम्यूनिटेशन वायरस के लिए नहीं कि आप हमें इन्फेक्ट कीजिए? क्या जरूरी नहीं कि हम समझे कि स्प्रेड ऑफ इन्फेक्शन कम्युनिटी में हमारे इस एक्टिविटी लैक ऑफ फॉलोअप ऑफ कोविड एप्रोप्रिएट बिहेवियर से लिंक्ड है? हमें सबको फिर भी यह समझने की जरूरत है कि हम अभी भी सेकेंड वेव पूरी नहीं हुई है, हम अभी भी सेकेंड वेव से डील कर रहे हैं.
But all warnings seem to be falling on deaf ears. Though daily cases have plummeted, there is no room to drop guard. But if Covidiots don't mend their ways, we will be inviting a third wave upon us, and soon. Bureau Report, India Today.
It seems like a lot of people are acting as if they were part of India's third wave Swagat Sena. When it comes to violating norms, both the major national parties are not far behind. In Telangana, netas from the BJP and the Congress led political rallies where social distancing norms were thrown to the winds.
Wednesday in Telangana. Friday in Telangana. Two of India's national parties doing a super swagatam for the third wave. If images like these have begun to trigger you, you're not alone. While you're constantly reminded about following rules and restrictions, these two images come like a slap in our collective faces. Brazen netas cocking a snook at COVID norms and tearing to shreds public faith in our politicians. Let's get a closer look at the new faces of India's third wave Swagat Sena. This was Wednesday. The man leading these crowds is Revant Reddy, the Congress party's new Telangana state chief. Swarmed by supporters, Reddy's Vijay Yatra saw these disturbing images. Not only did he break all COVID norms, this ridiculous Netagiri caused huge traffic jams in Hyderabad. The Hyderabad police has booked Reddy under the Pandemic Act on the grounds that he did not seek permission. And on Friday, it was the turn of the BJP's state president, Bandi Sanjay Kumar, seen here leading a huge rally in Telangana's Nagar Karnool district. Hundreds of BJP workers participated in the crowded rally welcoming Bandi Sanjay, who was riding a bike along with his supporters. And it looks like such crowds are the flavor of the season. The Telangana BJP chief recently announced that he will undertake a 750-kilometer long Padayatra from Hyderabad on August the 9th, right about the time the third wave is predicted to be upon us. Meanwhile, Member of Parliament from Telangana, Asaduddin Owaisi, was busy doing third wave Swagat himself, Stretching his wings in pole-bound Uttar Pradesh, he oversaw this hugely crowded inauguration of a party office in UP's Bahraich on Thursday. Do politicians have no memory of the second wave devastation? Is the KCR government in Hyderabad toothless against such netas, since the TRS itself has been an offender in terms of COVID crowds?
Telangana has lifted COVID-19 lockdown, however, the state is still reporting COVID-19 cases. Amid all these things, political parties and its leaders are busy holding meetings and rallies where many of the participants are not following COVID-19 protocol or wearing masks. When experts are warning for a possible third wave, these kind of behavior by our public representative definitely raises several questions. With camera person Damodar, Ashish in Hyderabad for India Today.
It was reckless behavior by India's netas in elections in Kerala, West Bengal, Assam and elsewhere that lulled people or played a part in making people feel as if sab changa si. And now we're seeing exactly the same thing happen, Dr. Trehan. And netas can blame people, people can blame netas, but it's the same society. And whether you're a public figure or an individual, people just seem to have reached a point where they've had enough. They realize they've seen the devastation that COVID can cause, but they're at a point where they say, dekhi jaoge, we'll see what happens, we don't particularly care.
So in face of all this, it's very clear the only savior we'll have is the intensity with which we can vaccinate. So there is a model called Shakti, which is developed by one of the senior people. It says that if we can vaccinate 50 lakh people a day, from now on, we can reduce the third wave by 25% or more. If we can vaccinate 70 lakh people a day, we can reduce it by 50% or more. And if we can, by some luck, reach 90 lakhs a day, we can actually flatten the wave. We have the capacity to vaccinate as far as the medical profession is concerned. The availability of vaccine will be very critical, and vaccine hesitancy will be the other unknown factor. And like everybody said, Delta plus or Delta, what havoc it will play in this new wave will depend on its virulence and its infectivity. So I think that we should, it's very disturbing, very discouraging, you should say, that after everybody has been saying the same thing, okay, if you're going out, just wear the mask and don't crowd in a place and don't go near people. Why people don't understand it? The price we have to pay, the whole nation pays for anybody's indiscretion.
And there are smart ways of doing this, Gautam. And if you want to go, for example, you can go to a less crowded place. You don't have to go to Nainital, Shimla or Mussoorie. There are smaller, cuter, quainter places that you can go to where you could still have your masti, but you don't need to be on the mall road in one of these hill stations.
That's exactly true. I mean, it is very disappointing to see elected representatives behave in the manner that your news clips described, setting a very bad example for the public. There are ways, as you point out, of being outside and yet being at low densities. You don't all have to crowd in the same place at the same time. And even if you're there in a place with a bunch of other people, mask, especially double mask, these are all sensible things to do. I'm surprised that more people aren't doing it. I'm glad that some governments are stepping up to ensure that numbers are limited, as your report also said, 50 people at a time and only half an hour each for that particular group. This goes some way towards dealing with this, but finally it must be people who take responsibilities, and it must be elected representatives who show them what to do by example.
Do you see that change, Dr. Trehan? Are we doomed in a way? Do you see people, Prime Minister warned, we saw in the Health Ministry briefing today, there was a dire warning. Do you think any of this will have an impact, or people are, just not going to care, especially if they've got one vaccine? In some of the comments you saw in that report, people are like, we know it's dangerous, but we'd still rather risk it.
One thing is that the leadership has to really set an example, and we are not seeing that in the country. The other thing that we must consider is that the healthcare system is actually suffering for the last 18 months. There is fatigue in the healthcare delivery system also. And the doctors will get more and more disappointed at public behavior when the third wave comes and crushes everything. So if the only hope, like I said in this whole thing, is people have shown that we cannot depend on them. We cannot depend on local governments because what they are doing is opening bars till 3 a.m. in the morning. What do people go to the bar for? To drink and be loud and take off your mask. You will not wear your mask there. And they're all closed spaces. So there is a huge risk that we are taking as a society, which we may pay very heavy price for. God forbid, we cannot actually accelerate our vaccine, and we can't get that protection because that will give us protection, that's for sure. So if we can accelerate and we can beat the third wave, hopefully we won't see the same ferocity as we saw in the second wave.
Samir and Panda, a lot of people wanting to travel abroad currently barred from being able to do so because of travel restrictions. COVID numbers on the rise in the US, in the UK, relative to where they'd fallen to. How long will these travel restrictions be in place? Is there any way at all to have a good sense of when these travel restrictions could be eased by the other countries?
So there are some very clear statements. If you are double vaccinated and 2 weeks beyond that, you will be, they are already relaxing. Like Europe, more than 11 countries have already relaxed that now. Now that's happening in the US also. Very soon it's expected that if you are vaccinated twice and then you have the certificate to go, it becomes like your vaccination passport. Now these are things that will have to be done because the whole world is suffering. But there will be some allowed movement in the next coming 2 to 4 weeks. This is my guess.
Okay. Samir and Panda, could you respond to that question as well? By when will people be able to travel if things go in the direction which they're going right now?
It is completely dependent on the country-specific data and the local epidemiology. So what gets applied for within the country will also be applicable for the countries outside, because here we are talking about the source country or the geographical location vis-a-vis the destination. So I would say that it's high time for India, even within the country, looking into the local level epidemiology, state level epidemiology, and taking a call. The same would apply for international travel as well, because the countries would certainly try see that the new variants do not get an opportunity due to the unrestricted travel for huge transmission that might happen if the variant is capable of transmitting efficiently. So while the vaccination is, the importance of vaccination has been underlined by everybody, but then the thrift use of vaccination, smart use of vaccination is what is required.
Okay.
So what should we vaccinate more is the issue.
No, so what should we be vaccinating more in your view?
Exactly. So in those districts where we still have the TPR, the test positivity rate, because we did talk about the Northeast and we did talk about Kerala, but in the Northeast the problem is different. We looked into the denominator, the number of tests conducted, which is really low in some of the states. So the testing needs to go up in order to know what is the exact nature of the problem. And if the test positivity ratio is really low, there it would be very prudent to vaccinate, because there is the place, that's the setting where you do not want the easing of the restriction to allow the infection to go back up. So now there are restrictions in the Northeast who actually instated the restrictions in the early phase of the second wave. So if we ease the restrictions now prematurely, you do expect the infection to go up. But is it due to that, or is it due to the less number of tests that's happening? That's very, very important. So where the TPR, test positivity ratio, is low, there the vaccination should happen. And again, in a population dense area, the priority should be again those who are above 60 and those with comorbidity, and then you go down from the upper age class interval to the lower. Whereas if we look into the rural setting where it is not population dense, there we have found out through our modeling exercise that the smarter move would be to vaccinate those who have comorbidities first and then covering those above 60. So if we have limited supply of vaccine in hand, it's more important to understand where do we move our consignment to. So I'm talking about basically Three things. One, looking into the local level data. Second, knowing where the problem is in terms of the TPR and how big is the problem, and we act early. And the third point is to reach out to the prioritized groups.
Okay, so I want to hold that thought there because there's some important insights that have come out. What's very clear is that you cannot be a Covidiot, you cannot be in an open or closed place with so many people without a mask around you. That's really inviting trouble. And we need to re-strategize, look at how we are opening up, because if we don't, there will be trouble sooner than later. For the time being, Dr. Trehan, Maninder Agarwal, Samiran Pandan, Gautam Menon, thank you for joining us. Up next, Congress mocks new Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia, shares a cartoon